The upcoming equalization payments were released by the federal government today. The Western provinces getting $0 are very unhappy with it. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. I picked this story up from the National Post. Western premiers call for a better deal as equalization payments hit a record $26.2 billion. Quebec is once again the top receiving province, raking in $13.6 billion, up a quarter of a billion from 2024, 2025. Now, the equalization payments, for those of you that might not understand, is they take from the provinces that have and they try to balance it out. We've been doing it in Canada since the 50s. This 1957, I believe, that they initiated it, and they even tried to enshrine it in the Constitution of Canada when it was brought back from England. I would point to the idea there's a few glaring issues with it. First of all, it is money that the provinces send to the federal government, and then it's supposed to be balanced out, but it's also supposed to come back to the provinces that are providing it. It's a bit suspicious that Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia don't get anything. And British Columbia, of course, is firmly in the seat of the far left, but Saskatchewan and Alberta, who are the only two provinces that have stood up strongly toward the federal government's carbon tax, are not getting any money for all of the carbon money that they've contributed. Over half of the equalization payment, they're paying $26.2 billion, and Quebec is receiving $13.6 billion. That doesn't seem equal to me at all. Now, they'll say, oh, look, it's based on, there's a couple of calculations that they use, and I'll show them to you right here. How equalization works. The allocation of equalization payments is based on a measure of fiscal capacity, which represents the revenues a province could raise if it were to tax at the national average rate. Equalization supports provinces that have a lower than average fiscal capacity. Provincial spending decisions and overall fiscal results do not affect the equalization payments. However, that is not necessarily the case. Everybody who knows anything about Canada knows that the highest tax rates in the country are in Quebec. They have the highest income tax. They have the highest at the cash register tax. They're one of the only places in the world that taxes, or at least in North America, that taxes the tax, which is to say, when you buy something, first you pay the provincial sales tax. The federal sales tax, and then that item then is taxed again at the new levels. It's really quite a cash cow for the province, and they still mismanage the money to the point where they are constantly saying that they need more, $13.6 billion. Now, as you can see there's a whole bunch of systems that they utilize to try and make these numbers. The one that I want to draw your attention to is this. Fiscal capacity is determined across 5 broad revenue categories: personal income tax, business tax, consumption tax, property tax, and natural resource revenue. Natural resource revenue. Natural resource revenue is kind of a touchy subject right now, isn't it? Everybody knows by now that Canada sits on top of the greatest resources on Earth, like the stockpiling that we have done. But Quebec getting $13.6 billion and at the same time saying that they're not going to touch their natural resources. They're not going to touch any of the minerals they have. They're not going to touch any of the oil they have. They're not touching any of it. They're saying, no, we have to leave it there because it's, carbon producing. And so we will let Alberta pay our way. Right? Alberta, the only province in the country that seems to be trying to go full steam ahead with tapping into its natural resources. Then the Liberal government steps in and destroys the ability of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia to make money for offshore drilling and hands them money as well. Now I have a breakdown over here. How you can see equalization payments for Newfoundland were nothing, and then all of a sudden in 2024 they had to start giving them. Same to coincide with the federal government sticking their nose into the offshore drilling. Again, destroying an industry that was viable, that was clean, and that was making a lot of money for both the province and the country, so that they could virtue signal to countries like China and Russia, I guess. I don't know who necessarily is saying to themselves, "Oh boy, look at Canada go." They're literally taxing themselves into the poorhouse. But as far as the Liberal government keeps saying, there's somebody out there that's impressed by it. I just don't yet see who that is. It's really plain to see when you come to Nova Scotia. You can see the equalization payments were going along just fine, and then all of a sudden the offshore offsets went to nil, went to zero. And as a result, the equalization payments had to go up and up and up, increasing by $1 billion in the last 3 years, because the federal government stepped in and took control of the offshore resources and told the province that it wasn't their jurisdiction, and that they're going to somehow, they made this panel and they're going to have offshore oil all run through these Liberal insiders who have been hand selected, and they're clearly filtering out considerable amount of jobs and investment away from the provinces of both Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and sending it I don't know where. But it better not be the IMF, it better not be Ukraine, it better not be any country that isn't Canada. And I'm something suspicious about the idea that maybe they're sending it to, Quebec. Who knows? What I can say with absolute certainty is that it's not going to Nova Scotia. And as a result, all of the revenue that is generated by the Western provinces is now being spread out among the Eastern provinces. While the Eastern provinces' natural resources, which is a major calculation in the factor, right? They factor in population and they factor in natural resources, because those natural resources are under the stewardship of the particular province, which is something that bothers the federal government and the authoritarian Liberal Party immensely. So here we have yet another great example of turning the carbon tax against the population to make people suffer and to do without. Appreciate the idea that if Quebec was to turn up its resources, that maybe $3 billion of that $10 billion, $13 billion could have gone to something else, like hospitals or schools. Could have gone anywhere else. There's so many other places it could go if Quebec would stop telling themselves that they have to rely on the rest of Canada to keep their whole entire government and their whole entire province afloat. Why would we not want to have a greater income so that we can pay off the debts that the Liberal government is pushing us into? And how fair is it for Alberta and Saskatchewan to crank out all of these natural resources, whether it be food, whether it be, and to be told that they are bad people, to be told that they got to cap their produce? Production is going down in these provinces based on the rules of the Liberal government. So where does that end? That ends in us either borrowing money to make it, these equalization payments, or it means that the equalization payments will go lower and the entire country will suffer as a result. All because the Liberal government wants to tell the world, virtue signal to, I don't know who, again, I'm going to say this time I'll say to the EU, that somehow we're going to be saving the planet with our tiny little footprint. Now, I'm not trying to point any fingers necessarily, except directly at the Liberal government, because this is another example of fiscal mismanagement. This is another example where the Quebec gets all of the handouts out of Ottawa, gets all of the attention, gets all of the special treatment, and the rest of the country suffers as a result. Only to have Quebec turn around and tell Canada that they don't even like being part of the team. Remember Team Canada? It's funny. It's odd. It's a strange position to think that the people who don't want to be part of Canada are going to absolutely 100%, the Bloc Québécois, are going to accept that $13.6 billion. You can be sure of that. The provincial government, who are also separatists, the CAQ, I believe, also will accept that $13.6 billion. They won't turn it down at all. But they will then turn around and say, don't you dare speak English in my province, and how dare you not be teaching French out in Alberta, and all of the other things that we keep hearing about over and over and over and over and over again for the last 50 years. It's no wonder that the country is disillusioned. It's no wonder that people are upset. I mean, we're talking about a complete and utter unbalancement of payments. So the Alberta creates this money, generates this money, and it never, ever, ever benefits their province. Same holds true for British Columbia. Same holds true for Saskatchewan. They basically have to give that money away to people who are not even trying to develop their natural resources. Or when they were trying to develop it, like in the case of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, the federal government come in and said, no, it's ours, not yours. I don't know. This doesn't seem right to me. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.